Good evening. I call the March 12th Penns Manor Area School Board meeting to order. Let's stand. No, I'm sorry. Mr. Muscatello, roll call. Pardon?
Oh, sorry, Mrs. Dalton.
Here.
Dr. Boston.
Dr. Boston.
Here.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Here. Here.
Mr. Hardesty.
Here.
Mr. Larch.
Here.
Mr. Plenick.
Here.
Mrs. Williams.
Here. Here.
Mrs. Tate.
Here.
Myself, Mr. Johnston.
Here.
Mrs. Dolges.
Here.
Mrs. Zeglen, I think she texted me and said she's having some issues with the internet. Mr. Grimaldi.
Here.
Mr. Dalton.
Here.
Mr. Gramling.
Here.
Mr. Safran.
Here.
And I see Mrs. Zeglen joining now. Okay.
Thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Johnson, any presentations this evening?
There are none this evening, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, sir. May we have a motion to approve the agenda as it's printed?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
No second.
Thank you.
I have a motion by Mr. Larch and a second by Mr. Plenick.
All in favor of the agenda, vote aye.
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 Motion carried. Any citizens' remarks this evening?
No.
Thank you. Minutes of all the meetings. May we have a motion to approve the minutes of the meetings as closed in our packets?
I'll make the motion. Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mrs. Tate and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Can we have a motion to approve the financial reports as printed?
Make the motion. Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by, was that Mrs. Eckenrode? Mrs. Tate? Got it.
Any discussion? Roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Plenick.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 8, presentation of bills. May we have a motion to authorize the payment of bills as presented? General Fund for 2021, $159,357.88. Athletic Fund, $14,934. Capital Reserve, 0. Cafeteria Fund, $23,711.57.
I'll make the motion.
Please. Thank you, Jill.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Eckenrode and a second by Mr. Larch.
Any questions? Mr. Muscatello, roll call.
Mrs. Dalton.
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode.
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Mr. Plenick.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Muscatello. Mr. Johnson, any program updates?
There are none this evening, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. All right, let's go to reports. Superintendent's report. Mr. Johnston?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardesty. First, I just want to go down through some agenda items, and then we have some other matters that I'd like to talk to you about that we'll do this evening. First, under curriculum, this evening, we're asking you to approve the 2021-22 school calendar. First teacher day for next school year will be August 23rd. First student day will be August 26th. Last teacher day will be June 1st, with the last student day May 31st. We're also asking you this evening to approve the revised 2020-2021 school calendar. I just want to point out that we did use all the 4 snow makeup days that we had listed in that calendar. So we will now be in session on March 19th, March 31st, April 6th, and April 11th. I also want to point out, because we're adjusting and using snow days, now we have school falling on a Wednesday and a Thursday before break. So both Wednesday, March 31st and Thursday, March 1st or April 1st will be early dismissal days. Moving along, under buildings and grounds this evening, we're asking the board to consider approval to award the bid for the electrical service renovation upgrade. The lowest bid for that project would be awarding it to K&K Jewett for $68,838.59. We've had discussion before that we will also need to approve an agreement with REA to do some of that electrical work. That will be presented to you in April for approval. Also under buildings and grounds this evening, asking your approval to permit Green Acres Contracting to install 625 feet of guide rail along 553 from the elementary school second driveway down to and past the playground. Also this evening, it's our recommendation to hire Rick Mazie as the new athletic director starting July 1st and ending June 30th, 2020 or 2022. That will be a one-year agreement with a base salary of $4,750. Also asking for your approval this evening to hire James T. Horwath as the track boys assistant coach 1. Also asking for a volunteer to be approved to help with softball, and that's Mrs. Stewart, who is a teacher here at the school. Moving down to new business, we're asking for your approval of the resignation due to retirement for Mrs. Vodapivic. Mrs. Vodapivic has been teaching here in the district for 34 years. Also asking you to approve under new business, pregnant and parenting teens program participation, which is a cost of $900 to the district. Also asking for approval for the superintendent's 2020 evaluation. Also asking approval for the Rashini Health Insurance dependent audit to be conducted. And that particular motion, if you recall, has come up with as we work through the budget, just as a process that we want to go through with all of our employees. Also this evening, we're asking for you to approve an agreement with Life Touch Photography effective July. And that is a one-year agreement with an option to renew for 2 additional years after. Also asking you to approve a substitute for this current school year. Also asking you to approve a new teacher mentor for Mrs. Horwath, who was recently hired. And that mentor teacher would be Mrs. Prebish. Also want to point out that we do have a added motion this evening that is printed in your packet, and that is to accept the resignation as board member from Mr. Packer. I just want to point out that Mr. Packer has served as a school board president for 30 years, or school board member for 30 years, and as board president for 29 years. Just want to thank him for his service and his leadership and resources that he's provided to the board, and also the leadership of bringing in the past 10 years with his leadership approximately $1 million to the district and doing different projects that did not have to come from our general operating budget. Also this evening, I want to remind you to please, if you want to be on a certain committee or don't want to be on a certain committee, that you send that information to me, regardless of your decision this evening. After accepting the resignation of Mr. Packer, we will need to talk about how we'll go through the process to replace him. Mr. Saffron will take care of that when we get to that motion. Also, back to the committees, I need you to submit that information, because whether you make a decision as a board to continue 1 month not filling the president's position, or if you feel that, I want to have a conversation, if it's Mr. Hardesty or whoever is presiding, that we have conversations to set up those committees. So again, we'll accept the resignation of Mr. Packer. That letter was presented to you today via email. And then we will talk about the process of filling that with Mr. Saffron. I will work with whoever presides over the meetings and talking about committees. Also, under new business, we have on the agenda to nominate and appoint a new president. I've talked to Mr. Saffron. That is totally your decision. I mean, I know it's been a quick process in the past 24 hours. So there's nothing wrong with the vice president presiding for a month until you move to that decision, or you can make that decision this evening and move forward. So when we get to the point on the agenda for new business for nominations, someone can make a motion to nominate someone, or someone can make a motion to table that. So again, that is clearly your decision as a board. And I also want to finish by saying congratulations to our girls varsity basketball team. I'm sure all of you are aware, but I certainly want to thank the coaching staff and the girls' hard work for capturing the first school district's girls varsity basketball District 6 title. And they will be moving on into state competition with their game a week from tomorrow. And that is all I have, Mr. Hardesty. We do not, Mr. Hardesty,
How about any old business?
and no business either, unless a board member has old business.
Anything anyone needs to discuss old business? All right, let's move on to negotiations. Anything to report, Mrs. Eckenrode?
Not this evening, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, Ms. Eckenrode. Mrs. Williams, how's the curriculum committee going? What do you have for us?
I have two areas tonight. I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2021-22 school calendar for the 2021-22 school year, with the first teacher day being August 23rd, 2021. The first student day is August 26th, 2021. A tentative last student day is May 31st, 2022, and the last teacher day as June 1st, 2022.
I'll second.
So we have a second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Any questions, discussion? Any questions or discussions? All right, roll call, Mr. Muscatello.
Sure. Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, Mrs. Williams? you
Yes, the
do.
next one to approve the 2020-21 revised school calendar. I'd like to make a motion to approve the revised 2020-21 school calendar as presented.
I'll
Do we have a
second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Budget and Finance, as Mr. Johnston pointed out, it's somewhat in disarray right at the moment, the committee. So I humbly request, as he did, Mr. Johnson did, that upon the election of a new president, the committees be set, and we'll work from there. There will be need, remember, it's a time thing. We have to have a vote by
30 days.
30 days.
Yes, 30 days.
So that will happen pretty quickly upon the election of a president. All right, Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Poleni.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardesty. I have two items. The first item is award bid for electric service renovation upgrade. I'd like to make the motion to award the bid for the upgrade of electrical service at the high school athletic complex to K&K Jewett Electrical Company at the cost of $68,838.59 as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Polenick and a second by Mr. Larch.
Discussion. Roll call, sir.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the second item I have is approved guide rail installation. I'd like to make the motion to approve a contract with Green Acres Contracting to install 625 feet of salvaged 2S guide rail on school property along Route 553 at a cost of $9,968.75. Capital reserve funds will be used for this project.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Polenick and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, Mr. Poleni. Athletic Committee, Mr. Large.
Yes, Mr. Hardesty, I have three items. First item is hire an athletic director. I'd like to make the motion to hire Richard Mazie as athletic director commencing on July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022 at an annual base salary of $4,750.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Larch and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Any discussion? Roll call, sir.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yeah.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, my second item is hire track boys assistant coach 1. I'd like to make a motion to hire James T. Horwath as boys assistant track coach 1, pending all clearances and required training at a salary of $2,969.66 as per the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1st, 2019 through July 31st, 2022.
Second, please.
Second. I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Larch and a second by Mr. Polenick.
Any discussion, folks? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, my next item is approve sports volunteer. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following sports volunteers for the 2020-21 school year, pending the receipt of all current clearances, cardio and impact testing, and the coaching education courses as required by the PIAA. Emily Stewart.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Larch and a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Any questions? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And that's all I have, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, Mr. Larch. Mrs. Tate, Transportation Committee.
Yes, I have one item tonight. Approved driver for the 2020-2021 school year. I would like to make the motion to approve the following bus driver and substitute for Tri-County Transportation for the 2020-21 school year. Elizabeth Coyle.
A second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Tate and a second by Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty, Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes,
Motion carries.
that's all I have
Thank you.
tonight, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tate. Mr. Johnson, anything in policy?
We have nothing under policies this evening, Mr. Hardesty.
Correspondence. I'm sure we have a ton of people writing us.
We have no correspondence
Okay.
this evening either.
We'll move on to new business. May we have a motion to accept the resignation of Mrs. Joetta Bodapivic with regret due to retirement effective the last day of the 2021 school year. Mrs. Vodapivic has been employed with the Penns Manor Area School District since July 10th, 1986.
I'll make the motion.
I'll
Second,
second.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mr. Larch.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Roll call, sir.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
yes,
Motion carries.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to approve the district's participation in the Pregnant and Parenting Teens Program provided by Aaron Intermediate Unit 28 for the 2021 school year as presented? The cost to the district is $900. This is the same cost as last year.
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion by Mrs. Dalton. Mrs. Eckenrode, would you like to second?
Yes.
Thank you.
Got it.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
yes,
Motion carries.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve the 2020 superintendent evaluation of Mr. Darren K. Johnston with an overall proficient rating of the performance standards for the 2020 calendar year. The school board of directors, as per the Pennsylvania School Code, will publish a statement on the district's website.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mrs. Tate and a second by Mr. Larch.
Any questions? Discussion? Let's have a roll call.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Other than my annual desire to vote on Mr. Safran's employment here, it's always a pleasure to take part in the superintendent's evaluation. And as I like to point out, by state law, the school code, we're allowed to find him proficient or unsatisfactory. Is that our two choices? And to me, proficient doesn't sound enough. It sounds sort of okay. And I just like to point out that in our averaging of all the board's members, all 9 members rating Mr. Johnston, we came up with a 4.46. And when I was in school, that would have been an A+ or something like that, I think. I don't know. So, and again, we do unsatisfactory, needs improvement, satisfactory, very competent, and outstanding. And folks, we do that so we can help guide the district, help guide Mr. Johnston, help guide us as a board. So that's why we split it down so much. So check out the website. We'll have a note on there of your evaluation, Mr. Johnston. And thank you very much for your hard work for us. All right. A motion is needed to approve a contract with the Rashini Group to conduct an insurance dependent eligibility audit as presented.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mrs. Eckenrode and a second by Mrs. Dalton.
Any questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Need a motion, or may we have a motion to approve a 1-year contract with Life Touch Photography with the option to extend the contract for up to 2 1-year renewals as presented. The start date of the first contract year shall be July 1, 2021. We have a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Tate and a second by Mr. Larch.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Mr. Muscatello, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item F, may we have a motion to approve the following day-to-day substitutes pending receipt of all current clearances for the 2021 school year. Melissa Smock, cleaner, IA secretary and cafeteria, and Grace Peace, cafeteria and secretary.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mrs. Dalton.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We need to approve a new teacher mentor. May we have a motion to approve Mrs. Prebish as a mentor for the recently hired teacher as per the induction program of the district. In lieu of compensation, approved mentors will receive compensatory time off. May we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, a second by Mrs. Eckenrode.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Palanick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The board and administration would like to acknowledge and congratulate the following. PMEA Student of the Month for March, Haley Warzel. The elementary spelling bee winners. First place, Lily Clutter. Second place, Kristen Hash. Third place, Austin McAfoose. Fourth place, Bella Price. We'd like to also recognize Connor Antonio. All Eastern Honors Orchestra members are chosen from 13 states who place high in their sections from the respective state festivals the previous year. Connor placed first overall in the trombone section at the PA State Concert Band last year. The following are 2021 PAFootballnews.com All Academic Gold Team. This happens to be a curriculum thing. This has to do with their grades. The students must have completed the 2020 football season and maintained a GPA of 4.0 or greater. Seniors, Dimitri Libb, Austin Hill, Kevin Baum, Connor Keith, Mason Engel, Ethan Joyner, Parker Clayton, Reese Hayes. Juniors, we have Alec Johnson. Sophomores, Justin Marshall, Aston Corvina, Mark Bagley, Nathan Raphael, and Max Hill. For the PAFootballnews.com All Academic Silver Team, which these students must have completed the 2020 football season and maintained at least a 3.5 to 3.9 GPA. Seniors, IJ Carlindsey, Tyler Price. Juniors, Nick Buterball, Ty Fennell. Sophomores, Adam Altimus, Eric Baum, and freshman Carter Smith. The 2021 footballnews.com All Academic Bronze Team. These student athletes must have completed the 2020 football season and maintained a GPA of 10 or between 3.0 and 3.49. And our senior is Tony Schultz. We also would like to congratulate Sabrina Smith, Region 3 FBLA Secretary for the 21-22 school year, and earning the FBLA National Future Awards. Again, our congratulations and thank you to these students for shining on Penns Manor. Item I, we need a motion to accept the resignation of Mr. Robert Packer as the school board director of the Penns Manor Area District. Mr. Packer has served the Penns Manor Area District for 30 years, with 29 of those years as board president. Motion, please.
I'll make the motion.
Looking for a second.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Thank you all.
I have a motion by Mrs. Eckenrode and a second by Mr. Palanick.
Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
I do want to explain to all the board members who received the letter from Mr. Packer, and then anybody that's watching this evening, the reason that Mr. Packer has submitted his resignation is because we have a policy, our membership policy, that states that should any school board director move out of the district in which they were elected, if they move out of the region, then they are no longer a board member. So Mr. Packer has communicated to the board in writing that he has moved out of Clymer Borough, where he has represented Clymer for 30 years. And he has moved to Cherry Hill Township within the district, but he has moved out of the region of Clymer Borough into Cherry Hill. So he is abiding by the board policy that again states that if you leave or move out of the region in which you represent, you are no longer a board member, that you would have to go through an election again, which he will do in Cherry Hill Township, where he now resides.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. A roll call vote.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston.
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Let's go.
Motion carries.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Packer. As Mr. Johnston says, we can move forward tonight, or we can table item J. So as on the agenda, it says we need a motion for nominations for a board president. Do we wish to proceed? Is the question, or do we wish to put off?
One
What is
question I
our,
have.
Go ahead.
The question is there's no motion on the agenda for that. Taking names for nomination doesn't require a motion or second, does it, Mr. Saffron?
No, you can nominate someone and you don't really need anyone else to second that nomination. Because we have actually room for 3 different nominations. In other words, 3 different people could be nominated. And then to get a majority for one person.
Thank you.
Yeah, I misstepped that. I apologize. So nominations are in order for board president.
I'd like to nominate John Hardesty for president.
Mr. Saffron, you had something else?
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have one nomination for Mr. John Hardesty.
Any others?
I nominate Mr. Ron Larch.
I have a second nomination, excuse me, I have a nomination for Mr. Larch.
Any others? How do we proceed here, Mr. Saffron?
If there are no other nominations, then the nominations would be closed. And we would simply have a motion to elect one of the 2 nominees as president of the board. As your roll call name is called, you would just say yes as to Mr. So-and-so, yes as to Mr. Hardesty, or yes as to Mr. Larch. And if one of the 2 candidates gets more than 4 votes, then they would be the board president.
All right, we ready to proceed? Roll call, sir.
May I just have one moment, please?
Yes. We need a motion since we have nominations, we are looking for a motion to elect either Ronald Larch or John Hardesty as board president of the Penns Manor Area School Board of Directors.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second it.
All right.
I have a motion by Mr. Plenick and a second by Mrs. Dalton.
Okay.
No, you can vote for yourself because it's an unpaid position.
You're not getting money, are you, Ron? Okay, me neither. Let's be proud of ourselves.
Yeah, it's fine to vote for yourself for anything like that because you're not being paid for it. I do want to point out too, that the person elected as president would continue to serve until the end of the term, which would be actually our reorganization meeting in December.
Need a roll call, Mr. Hurst?
Roll call, please.
Okay, roll call. Mrs. Dalton,
Yes, John Hardesty.
Dr. Boston,
Yes. Mr.
As to which candidate?
okay. You said Mr. Hardesty, Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Got it, thank you. Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes, for Mr. John Hardesty.
Mr. Hardesty,
John Hardesty.
Mr. Larch,
Ron Larch.
Mr. Plenick,
Mr. Ron Larch.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes, for John Hardesty.
Mrs. Tate,
Mr. Hardesty.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes for Mr. Hardesty and 1, 2 votes for Mr. Larch.
Ron and I'm sure, both appreciate the votes we have, and we'll continue to do the best job we can do
Sure can.
in our positions, right?
Sure can, John.
Absolutely.
Mr. Hardesty.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
So you get to make a decision to move forward to
Okay.
electing a vice president,
Right.
or you can table that also. Your
So,
choice.
as Mr. Johnston was saying, my position as board vice president is vacated. So we can go through the same process at this moment or put it off, and that's not the right way to say it, to knock it till next week at our next meeting in April, move it to the next meeting of April for nominations for an election of a board vice president. But we'd have to change the agenda, amend the agenda at that point.
That's correct.
Yes, so what say ye? What do we want to do? Discussion on whether to move forward tonight or to hold off?
I would suggest we move forward electing tonight or nominating tonight.
All right, any other discussion on it? Anybody want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think tonight would be a good idea as well.
Okay. Virtual folks, you cool with going forward? All right, we're going to need to amend the agenda.
Yes,
A motion.
we will need a motion to amend the agenda to nominate and elect a vice president of the board.
I'll make the motion.
Looking for a second.
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 A motion by Mrs. Eckenrode and a second by Mr. Plenick.
And that's a voice vote to amend the agenda. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we'll have a voice vote, please, Mr. Saffron. What's the other guy's name? Muscatello.
You'll ask if there's all in favor, say aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, motion carried. So nominations are in order for board vice president.
I nominate Jill Eckenrode.
I have one nomination for Mrs. Jill Eckenrode.
I nominate Mr. Ron Larch.
I have one nomination for Mr. Ron Larch.
Any other nominations? Nominations are closed. Whoops. Is that correct?
They are.
Okay. I didn't jump on anybody, did I? No, we cool? All right. So we have nominations of Director Jill Eckenrode and Director Ron Larch to be board vice president. So we need a motion to elect either of these two candidates as vice president of the Board of School Directors. And again, just as we did previously, when your name is called, vote for your candidate.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes, Jill Eckenrode.
Dr. Boston,
Yes, Jill Eckenrode.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes, Jill Eckenrode, thank you.
Mr. Hardesty,
Jill Eckenrode.
Mr. Larch,
Ron Larch.
Mr. Polenick,
Mr. Ron Larch.
Mrs. Williams,
Jill Eckenrode.
Mrs. Tate,
Jill Eckenrode.
Mr. Hardesty, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes for Mrs. Eckenrode and 2 votes for Mr. Larch.
All right. Congratulations to you both for your nominations, and Mrs. Eckenrode, congratulations to you. You need to start, it didn't happen to me, but pertinent statute and those words that we got to come up with when you fill in is about what I think the VP does. So get those things in line.
I will do that,
And
John.
We
I
need
want to say,
somebody to know the,
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank you all for putting your trust in me. And I'm sure Mr. Larch agrees that we will both continue to serve our district to the very best of our ability. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
You need to brush up on your Roman numerals also. All right, I see because, well, let's get rid of 21. I see there are no field trips or conferences we need to approve. Is that correct?
There are some that are attached, so
Oh, I missed that.
that's okay.
We need a motion to approve the following field trips and conferences as attached.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Mrs. Williams.
I have a motion by Mrs. Williams and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Any discussion? Roll call, sir.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes,
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes,
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, with the Clymer Area 1 or Region 1 vacated by Mr. Packer, what's our procedures, or what do you counsel us to do?
Well, I just want to update the board, refresh your memories with regard to what happens when we have a vacancy on the board. The school code provides that when you have a vacancy, the vacancy will be filled by a majority vote of the remaining school board members, meaning that in this case, there would be 8, so you would have to have 5 votes for any particular individual interested in being appointed to that position. With regard to time limitations, the school code and your policy provides that the board has 30 days from the date of the occurrence of the vacancy to fill the vacancy. If you fail to do that, whether it be through the passage of time or you have 4-4 votes and can't break that 4-4 vote tie, any interested citizen can, based upon a petition signed by 10 residents, would then petition the court, and the court can appoint that person as a board member. If nobody petitions, the board can continue to deliberate and appoint someone, but always being aware that you run the risk that you may lose that ability after that 30-day period ends, because someone could go into court and petition to court for approval. And that has happened in the past. I don't think of this district, but in other districts that I've represented, it has happened. Our policy is basically mirrors what the school code says. There's no definitive methodology as to appointing someone to a vacancy. I represent another district, and in that district we have a policy set out, and it might be something you want to consider. For instance, when there is a vacancy, then the administration advertises that there is a vacancy and sets up a timeline for the time period by which anybody interested from that region where the vacancy occurs, in this case Clymer, would indicate that they are interested. There's a form that they would procure from the school district and fill it out. There's a list of questions that's right in the policy, so that any board member applying has an opportunity to prepare their answers before they go before the board, because in this case, this district requires the prospective board members to be interviewed by the board. And of course, those questions would be posed and they would provide their answers. You should be aware that the whole process of choosing someone to fill a vacancy is one that is open to the public. In other words, if you're going to interview prospective people or that want to fill the vacancy, that has to be done at an open meeting. You can't do that in an executive session. The reason for that is that a school board member is not an employee of the district. You're not personnel, and therefore you don't fall within the exception to the Sunshine Act. The second part of it is that not only the interviews have to be done in public, but any discussions or deliberations by the board regarding the candidates that have submitted an application, all those deliberations must be done at your public meeting, cannot be done in executive session. Again, for the same reason, it doesn't fall within the exception of the Sunshine Act. So that's a procedure that has worked for some districts. The one thing you always have to keep in mind is that timeline, and that is you have that 30-day period. In this case, Mr. Packer submitted his resignation letter, I think today, at least that's when I got a copy of it, and that it's been accepted today. So the clock starts ticking tomorrow as your first day. So you have 30 days. Say, for instance, in this case, if you wanted to go ahead and advertise for individuals that might be interested, I would think that they'd have to have their applications in sometime before April the 1st, because April 1st is your committee meeting. And then that would give you an opportunity at the committee meeting to interview candidates if you wanted to do it at that meeting, or if you wanted to postpone it to the April 8th business meeting, and then interview and then choose someone that same night. So those would be your choices, but again, watching that timeline. And I'm throwing that out there. I'm not, every district does it differently. It's entirely up to the board. At this moment, you don't have a policy outlining these things, but I think tonight as a board, if you want to discuss it and come to some consensus, you could give the directive to your superintendent administration to follow through with that. Any questions?
I have one question, Mr. Saffron, as far as, and this might be more so directed to Mr. Johnston, but as a follow-up, but in regards to the advertisement side of what you just explained, I guess that 30-day solicitation of individuals. In this particular case, if there is somebody interested in that position and is not attending by video, YouTube tonight, or obviously in person, our plans are to advertise in a local publication for that, because if that's the case, then that did differentiate between our last situation that we ran into with the untimely death of Mr. Ron Belchick. So just to compare the two scenarios are similar, just finding out that we're going to be consistent with that, and how does that impact moving forward?
Well, that's the luxury of having the policy, because when someone resigns and you accept the resignation, you at least know that that's started and it's at your meeting, and now you can discuss it. If someone dies, that vacancy occurs at the time of their death. You may have had your meeting and 2 weeks may have already gone by, before you meet again. So you really don't have the luxury of fitting everything into that schedule so that you can vote on it within the 30-day period. But if you have the policy, then your administration can kick into gear and do the advertisement, set up the timeline so that if you want to interview at your committee meeting, that date will be set, and then act on it at your regular meeting as long as it's a 30-day period.
Yeah, as far as that, I understand that side of
Okay.
it, but the solicitation advertisement portion is sort of what I was understanding, because that's something that, can be done as soon as an event takes place,
Right,
resignation. So that is somewhat differing than what we had encountered
Right,
earlier.
exactly, because right now, as I said, our policy basically says nothing more than what's in the school code. If you have a vacancy, the board can fill it. They have 30 days to fill it. If they don't, somebody can petition the court, et cetera. As far as the nuts and bolts of how do you get there to nominate somebody or to appoint somebody, that's up to each school district to decide.
So
Okay,
it'd be-
thank you.
So it'd be my suggestion that you make a decision tonight, the process that you want to go through. Of course, we can't have the admin regs drafted and approved, but whatever steps that you want to take to fill this particular position, I'd advise us that you tell me to create the admin regs, because this board has never set admin regs as to how to proceed. So I know it may take a little time, but I would ask that you have that discussion this evening as to how you want to proceed to fill this particular one. I will draft the admin regs as to the procedure you want to follow, and I will have that on the April board meeting for you to approve.
I'm sure everybody got from Mr. Johnston, United School Districts filling a board vacancy policy with everyone, I thought. And you probably had your
I have.
fingers all through that, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
The only thing I don't see on it, so we perhaps use it as a template, have folks look over it. I like the idea of it having the same questions we ask, but I don't see in it where it says, is this the only policy United does? Do they require a public solicitation. I would think that's where we would want to be, is to have, put something in a paper so everyone could see it and then get back with the, in that time frame. Is that
They do advertise for
Advertise?
candidates, yes, yes.
but it's not in policy?
It,
Probably not. I don't see it. That's my thoughts, folks. So let's hash this out. The big change is the Mrs. Eckenrode, Mrs. Williams was involved. Mrs. Dalton, of course, no, you weren't involved in this. And Miss Dr. Boston, we did have interviews, but they were done in executive session or privately or whatever we want to say. And that's what we found out, I guess, or we found out the last time we were doing improperly. We should not have been doing that. And that's why Mr. Saffron's spelling this out. We asked for it at our last meeting, especially the committee meeting, to discuss that. Mrs. Eckenrode, of course, and Mr. Polinick both had the feelings, the strong feelings on that, and they're exactly correct. So how do we want to direct our superintendent along with the administration and Mr. Saffron, excuse me, our solicitor, to proceed? Do we want to study it? Do we want them to come up with something? Then we'll go on it. Do we want to make a committee and have a meeting and put things in? What say you? Yes, sir.
Mr. Hardesty, I have just, a point that I'd like to make for clarification on this. I think that the process outline procedure that Mr. Saffron provided is a good procedure.
Yes, sir.
But I'm looking at the front end of that. That's incorporating having that approach of gathering interested candidates, potential board directors, and following that through. I'm more concerned on the front end of how do we go about advertisement, because it's difficult in this day and age to say, okay, if you know anybody who's interested, or they may not be interested, or something like that, if it's advertised in a public document, newspaper, something like that, as if you were to advertise for a vacancy of faculty, that similar approach would be made, because a lot of times, and I think it's probably found out in just this recent appointment, a lot of the unsuccessful individuals didn't even really know what the status was.
Sure.
And I think there's probably even some folks that if they would have even known that time frame existed, they maybe would have put in, but they didn't know about it.
Sure.
So I think to help ourselves, it would be best to have the front end. How do we approach advertisement? And then we have a procedure in front of us that
Yes, sir.
is a good procedure.
The policy does provide, the sample policy that you have does provide that the board vacancy will be advertised. And
Yes.
what I believe they do is they have two different newspapers. One is the Indiana Gazette, and the second one is a regional paper that comes out once a week. I think they advertise in each of those. Also, they put it on the district website that the vacancy is there, and that the procedure that anybody that wants to apply would follow. There is also, I don't know, Mr. Johnston, if you had passed this out, it's the questionnaire application form that's used.
You just sent me this portion.
Okay, well, this was the next policy over. It references the application, but this is the actual application: name, address, telephone number, fax number, email address. Do you have any children in the district or enrolled in the district? Have you participated in any district-sponsored activities? Are you involved in any community services or service organizations? What qualities, talents, or experience would you bring to the board? Something simple as that. they sign it, date it, and submit it. That's their application. Then I think what happens is the board would review these. They could be emailed out to you. And if you have 20 people, you might not want to interview 20 people, but this would give you an opportunity to determine maybe you want the top 5 or something like that. But yeah, this is the second part of that. I'll give this to you.
What are, y'all should know, what are the requirements to be a school board director? Do you need to be a property owner? And I think the answer is no.
No, you have to be a qualified elector. That is that you have to be eligible to vote. You have to have lived within the Penns Manor Area School District for a period of 1 year. And because Penns Manor has regional voting, 3 separate regions, you have to live in the region where the vacancy occurred.
Okay. And that's
basically
it. Okay. And that would be spelled out, I would think, in any solicitation or whatever announcement. And so we could do the mainline newspaper, I think, so one fellow.
Yes. So you already approved as a board, and we will use all the media that you've approved at our reorganization meeting, which is the Indiana Gazette mainline website, and we'll also put it on Facebook.
That gets it out, don't you think, folks?
Yeah.
And you'll work together to come up with the correct verbiage, so we do it in the time frame. And we will be busy after March or April 1st, won't we, to get together and choose someone. And you'll need to come up with us, taking everybody's in consideration, a plan to get that done virtually or in person. Folks, what else?
Well,
ahead.
with regard to the deadlines, would you contemplate interviewing the candidates at your committee meeting, which is April the 1st, and then voting on it on April the 8th? Or did you want to have the interviews on April the 8th and vote on it April 8th also?
We have to be done by the
Because we're
12th, right?
Yeah.
April 12th or something like that.
yeah, it's 30 days from,
September, April.
yeah.
A couple more days after the business meeting.
So you're at April. Today's the 11th.
We wouldn't make it doing
So the 10th,
regular meeting. Right?
Yeah.
Do it at the committee meeting to get 30 days. Correct?
Unless
no,
we did it all-
your business meeting is April the 8th.
Correct. Oh, that would do it.
Yeah, so we'll
Yep.
make the 30 days.
I won't be at the April 8th
But
meeting.
the other-
That'll affect,
Pardon me?
I won't be attending the April 8th meeting. I'll be out of town. I don't know if that'll affect the voting.
Thank you for that. How do you feel about, as your crystal ball says, how busy is April going to be as a?
I mean, business is business, and you as a board have to get it done. So my recommendation is that you do the interviews on the 1st, and that you approve whoever you're going to approve on the 8th.
I think that's good, Mr. Johnston. I agree with that.
And making a deadline for applicants to have everything in on the March 31st.
I think that sounds good.
And they will be given the questions. Is that what we decided? So they can prepare for that?
Yeah, so it's my understanding, here's what we're going to do. We're going to advertise on through the media that you have approved at the reorganization meeting. It's my understanding that you would like to use the sample that has been given to us, which includes the questions. Mr. Safran has offered also a sample of a application that each one of those individuals will complete. So we will obtain any interested person's application in the format that Mr. Safran has given us. So we will follow that method unless you object. And then also at the April board meeting, all of that will be placed into an admin reg that matches a policy that you'll approve, and that will always be then set for any situation that occurs for vacancy in the future.
Okay, and with regard to the advertisement, we're going to have to indicate that applicants will be interviewed at the April 1 meeting because, people have schedules too, and they're, they need to be able to schedule that they're going to be available that date.
So you all will work on that. How long does it take to get something in the paper? Is it,
Usually 2 or 3 days.
and how long would we, what's a fair advertisement? Now, it's going to be on the, on our website and then on Facebook for that time frame. So that will even be longer than that. How long should we advertise it for? Do we have a requirement there, Mr. Safford?
No, that's really up to the board if you want to run it one time in each paper.
How do y'all feel? Couple of days, 1 day? We don't
Your
really want to
suggestion.
do it just because we could say we did what we had to do. But, how many read, sorry, Mr. Clinton, how many read the legal notices in the paper right now? Mr. Larch, you have your finger on there.
Yeah, I think 3 days would be good.
Is it,
Yeah, you'd be surprised people that do read the legal notices, that peruse them. And then you wouldn't be surprised if people take pictures of the legal notices and then repost them on Facebook.
I just want to confirm 3 consecutive days. Because for projects that are bid out, we're talking 3 Mondays or 3 legal notices over a period of, what is it?
Well, we're on
3
the
weeks.
deadline, so I'd say
Yeah.
3 consecutive.
3 consecutive days.
Yes.
Okay.
not that it has anything to do or should affect it? What's that will cost us?
Legal notices are more expensive the lengthier they get. Most times what we'll do is we'll put some of the basic information in there and then direct them to our website to get more information. But we'll put the basics of the information in there to make sure that they know where to apply, what the deadlines are.
Does it have to be a legal notice? Can it be an ad like we're advertising, if we were advertising, which we have recently for professional, et cetera, et cetera?
Well,
Is that cheaper?
no, it's,
It probably is more expensive.
Okay,
But why don't we put it 1 day in the legal notices and 2 days in the classified? That's why we got it all covered.
they usually put the legal notices in Indiana Gazette are in the classified.
They are, but they're on like a different page.
Yeah,
So, you know,
it all depends on their spacing that particular, the time.
anybody
but-
have hard feelings on that, or we want to leave it up to our professionals?
I think in my opinion, three days solicitation, and we approved the media that we're going to use. We put an ad in there and that's it. Whether we decide to spend thousands of dollars on it or $10 on it, we know what the outcome is it's advertisement for a school director at this time, at this. So I wouldn't get too detailed with it.
Okay.
As far as how and where and what location. 3 days advertisement, move on. And decide.
And what's-
If I recall correctly, that 6 years ago, whenever I was looking to get appointed on the board and I submitted a letter of interest, I'm thinking it was in the paper
I wouldn't know.
in a legal notice. That's what
Now, something we hadn't thought about, if anybody talks to anybody, as the filing deadline's over, so this person will need to run as a write-in, or, which we hope not, is just be a seat filler. Is that fair to say that? But they'll have to write, if they want to continue, they'll have to run write-in vote. Just like I did when I didn't fill out my paperwork right, and
I would suspect during our interview process, that type of conversation would take place. And if you didn't understand it, whenever you intended
yeah,
through a letter of interest, and then you find that out, then maybe at that point in time, that potential candidate can say, you know, well, I'm not interested, and they'll move on. So I think that's a consideration.
Was Mr. Packer up for reelection this year?
Yes.
He was.
Yes.
Okay.
You three comfortable?
Yes.
The only thing I was going to point out with the main line, they only publish once a week.
Yes, they do.
So if we put it in there 3 times, it's going to have to be whatever day they.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't help us, does it? So it's
No.
once or twice.
We'll do it. We'll get it in there as many times as we can before the deadline.
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
best you can do.
Everybody okay? Comfortable? We'll have a policy, read over these. If you have any questions or concerns, you can present those to Superintendent Johnston. But if you would copy me, I'd appreciate it. You know, if you feel that there's a question in there you'd like, don't like, whatever. But, you know, it seems like it covers it. So we cool, we gone? Does this require any action on our part tonight?
No, it's just a directive to the
Okay.
administration.
The only thing left at this point, Mr. Hardesty, would be a motion to adjourn if you're ready.
Well, we have,
22.
pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're on number
Yeah,
22.
he's jumping ahead tonight. What's your name? Mr. Johnston has asked us to get our SWOT analysis in, if you can, to himself, or I think Mr. Muscatello. Upcoming meetings are, as we know, April 1st is our committee meeting. The business meeting is April the 8th here and online. And some other dates you may want to keep in mind is Solicitor Saffron's birthday is day after tomorrow. Mr.
Thanks.
Johnston is the 24th of this month. And not that we won't meet again, so he can get it twice. Mr. Plenick is April the 2nd. That's a Friday this year, Mr. Plenick. Yeah, okay. All right. All right. Anything else for the good of the club tonight? Motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, sir. Any second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Get to do it again. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.